Story 1, The Lifeguard's Curse. In the coastal town of Baybrook, there stood an old water park called Blue Wave Waters, a relic of the 90s with outdated slides and peeling paint, but it still drew crowds in the summer. Evan had always loved visiting as a kid, so when he got the job as a lifeguard before heading off to college, it felt like a dream. The job seemed simple: keep an eye on the guests, make sure everyone was safe, and enjoy the sun. But on his first day, something strange happened. As he took his position at the wave pool, a deep sense of unease washed over him. Despite the crowds of people splashing and laughing, Evan felt like he was being watched. Every now and then, out of the corner of his eye, he thought he saw a dark figure floating just beneath the surface of the pool. Each time he looked directly, the figure vanished. Brushing it off as his imagination, Evan continued his shift. A few days later, he overheard two older lifeguards whispering about the boy in the wave pool. According to them, years ago, a young boy named Kyle had drowned during the park's opening season. No one knew how it happened. The lifeguards had been distracted, and when they finally noticed, it was too late. His body was pulled from the water, lifeless. Some said his spirit never left the wave pool, and every summer, his ghost would resurface, haunting the park. Evan tried to ignore the stories, but the sightings became more frequent. On his evening shifts, he began to hear splashes after the park had closed. One night, as he was locking up the gate, he saw him, a pale boy, dripping with water, standing at the edge of the wave pool. His eyes were hollow, and his mouth moved silently, as if calling for help. But before Evan could react, the boy disappeared, leaving nothing but ripples in the water. The dream started soon after. Every night, Evan dreamed of drowning. In his dreams, he would be swimming in the wave pool when a cold hand would grab his ankle, dragging him under. He would struggle, the water filling his lungs as he sank deeper and deeper. But the worst part was the face he saw just before waking, the boy's cold, dead eyes staring at him from the depths. Evan's last shift was during a stormy afternoon. Dark clouds loomed overhead, and the park was nearly empty. He was stationed at the wave pool again, keeping watch over the few swimmers braving the weather. The waves crashed harder than usual, almost unnatural. In the distance, Evan spotted the boy again, floating just below the surface, staring up at him. This time, he wasn't alone. Two other shadowy figures, their faces pale and distorted, floated beside him. Evan's heart raced as he blew his whistle, ordering everyone out of the pool. But the swimmers couldn't hear him over the roar of the waves. Desperate, he jumped in, swimming toward the boy, determined to put an end to whatever nightmare had taken over his life. As soon as he dove beneath the surface, icy hands wrapped around his arms, pulling him down. He thrashed and kicked, but the harder he fought, the deeper he sank. The boy's face appeared in front of him, inches away, his mouth opening in a silent scream. Evan's lungs burned as he tried to break free, but it was too late. The water filled his mouth, and everything went dark. The next morning, the lifeguards found his clothes neatly folded by the edge of the pool, but Evan was never seen again. Some say the curse of the boy in the wave pool claimed another victim, while others believe Evan's soul is now trapped, forever watching over the water, waiting for the next unlucky lifeguard. Story 2, The Slide to Nowhere. Wetland Park had always been known for its extreme water slides, and none was more infamous than the Devil's Drop. Towering over the park, this slide was a near-vertical chute that twisted and turned through dark tunnels before shooting riders into a deep pool at breakneck speed. Over the years, the slide had become a legend, not for its thrills, but for the strange incidents associated with it. Tim, Mark, and Jake were thrill-seekers, the type of guys who laughed in the face of danger. When they heard about the Devil's Drop and the eerie rumors surrounding it, they couldn't resist. They arrived at the park early one Saturday morning, determined to conquer the slide. As they waited in line, Tim overheard the people in front of them talking about the slide's strange history. Apparently, several riders had gone missing on the slide over the years. They entered the tunnel but never came out, their screams echoing inside until everything went silent. Mark scoffed at the stories. "It's just a ride," he said. "People make stuff up to freak you out." But as they climbed the stairs to the top, Tim couldn't shake the uneasy feeling growing in the pit of his stomach. The higher they climbed, the colder the air became, until it felt like they were standing at the top of a mountain rather than a water slide. Mark was the first to go. With a whoop of excitement, he threw himself down the chute and disappeared into the dark tunnel. Seconds later, Jake followed, his laughter fading as he sped down the slide. Tim hesitated at the top, listening for the splash that should have signaled their arrival at the pool below. But the park was eerily silent. Taking a deep breath, Tim pushed off, launching himself into the tunnel. The slide was pitch black, the twists and turns disorienting. He was moving fast, too fast. The walls seemed to close in around him, and the air was so cold it felt like he was sliding through ice. Suddenly, the tunnel stretched out in front of him, longer than it should have been. He should have reached the pool by now, but instead, the slide continued, twisting and turning endlessly. Panic set in as the tunnel darkened even further. The temperature dropped sharply, and the once smooth walls of the slide felt rough and jagged, as if he was no longer on a man-made structure but sliding through something ancient and unnatural. Tim's body jerked as the slide twisted sharply, and he felt as though he was being pulled deeper into the earth. After what felt like hours, Tim was suddenly ejected from the tunnel, but instead of splashing into a pool, he landed in a shallow, icy stream. Gasping for breath, he looked around and realized he wasn't in the water park anymore. The stream wound through a dark, misty forest, the trees towering above him, their branches knotted and twisted like gnarled hands. The only sound was the slow trickle of water and the distant, haunting echo of screams. His heart pounded in his chest as he stumbled to his feet, looking around for any sign of his friends. In the distance, he saw a shadowy figure moving through the trees. "Mark? Jake?" he called, his voice shaking. But as the figure drew closer, Tim realized it wasn't his friends at all. A pale, gaunt man stepped out of the mist, his eyes hollow and his skin stretched tightly over his bones. He pointed a bony finger at Tim, his mouth opening to speak, but no sound came out. Instead, a low, guttural moan filled the air, and Tim's blood ran cold. Before he could react, more figures emerged from the shadows, men, women, children, all with the same lifeless eyes and expressionless faces. They surrounded him, their mouths moving silently as they pointed toward the stream. The water, once clear, had turned black and thick, like oil, and it bubbled ominously as if something was stirring beneath the surface. Terrified, Tim turned and ran, sprinting through the trees, but no matter how far he ran, the stream always seemed to be just ahead of him. His lungs burned as he pushed himself harder, the voices of the dead echoing in his ears. Finally, he stumbled into a clearing and collapsed on the ground, gasping for air. But when he looked up, he was back at the base of the Devil's Drop. The park was empty, the ride silent, and there was no sign of his friends. He never saw Mark or Jake again. Story 3, The Drowning Hole. Splash Oasis was a family-friendly water park, the kind of place where parents could relax while their kids enjoyed the lazy river or the giant wave pool. But hidden in the back corner of the park was a small, unremarkable pool known as the Drowning Hole. It wasn't advertised on the park maps, and most people didn't even know it existed. Those who did knew to stay away. The Drowning Hole had earned its name years ago when a young girl named Clara had drowned there under mysterious circumstances. She had been swimming with her family when, without warning, she disappeared beneath the water. Lifeguards searched the pool, but Clara's body was never found. Some believed she had been pulled into the filtration system, while others whispered that something far darker had taken her. Sarah and her friends had heard the rumors, of course. But like most teenagers, they didn't believe in ghosts or curses. So one night, after the park had closed, they snuck in, determined to prove the legends were nothing more than old stories. The group laughed and joked as they climbed over the fence, making their way through the darkened park. Sarah led the way, her flashlight cutting through the shadows as they approached the drowning hole. It was a small, square pool, surrounded by a rusted fence, the water murky and still. "Are you sure this is the place?" her friend Max asked, peering into the pool. "Yeah," Sarah replied. "This is it." The air around the pool was thick and heavy, as if the very atmosphere was pressing down on them. The others hung back, uneasy, but Sarah wasn't afraid. She stepped up to the edge of the pool and knelt down, shining her flashlight into the water. For a moment, everything was quiet. Then, without warning, the water rippled, and Sarah gasped as a pale face appeared just beneath the surface. It was a girl, her long hair swirling around her like seaweed, her eyes wide and unblinking. Sarah stumbled back, but the girl's face remained, staring up at her with a haunting intensity. "Did you see that?" Sarah whispered, her heart pounding in her chest. "What?" Max asked, stepping closer. "What did you see?" Before Sarah could respond, the girl's face disappeared, and the water went still again. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them, something just beneath the surface, waiting. The group decided to leave, but as they turned to go, the air around them grew colder. The wind picked up, swirling through the trees, and the water in the pool began to churn. Sarah froze as a low, mournful wail echoed through the park. The others took off running, but Sarah couldn't move. She was rooted to the spot, her eyes locked on the pool. Suddenly, a hand shot out of the water, pale and bony, its fingers grasping at the air. It grabbed Sarah's ankle, pulling her toward the edge of the pool. She screamed, struggling to break free, but the hand was impossibly strong. Max turned back just in time to see Sarah being dragged into the water, her screams muffled as the dark water swallowed her whole. By the time the others reached the pool, Sarah was gone. The water was calm once again, and there was no sign of their friend. The next morning, the police found Sarah's body floating in the drowning hole. But something was wrong. Her skin was pale and wrinkled, as if she had been in the water for days, not hours. And her eyes were wide open, staring blankly into the sky, as if she had seen something terrible just before she died. Some say that Clara finally claimed her revenge that night, dragging Sarah down into the depths to join her. Others believe that the drowning hole is cursed, that once you enter, there's no way out. Either way, Splash Oasis was closed down soon after, and the drowning hole was filled in. But the legend of the pool lives on, whispered among those brave enough to visit the abandoned park at night.